Picture this. It's 793 AD. A sleek warship cuts through the North Sea like a knife. But these aren't just raiders with axes and shields. These are the world's most sophisticated venture capitalists. And their portfolio? The entire coastline of Europe. The Vikings didn't conquer with violence alone. They conquered with something far more powerful: financial innovation that would make modern Wall Street executives jealous. Welcome to Forgotten Finance, where lost money lessons come back to life. You've been lied to about the Vikings. Hollywood sold you berserkers and bloodlust. But the real story? It's about the most advanced economic system of the medieval world, built by people we dismissed as barbarians. Today, we're diving into the financial empire that ruled the seas for 3 centuries. And by the end of this video, you'll see why Viking economic strategies are more relevant to your wealth in 2024 than you ever imagined. Let's get into it. Here's what your history teacher didn't tell you. Viking raids weren't chaotic pillaging. They were precisely calculated investment expeditions with clear ROI targets. Every longship that left Scandinavia was essentially a floating hedge fund. And here's the genius part. They didn't fund these expeditions the way kingdoms did, with taxes and conscription. They invented something completely different: the félag. The félag was a partnership agreement where multiple investors pooled resources for a single voyage. Think of it as a medieval venture capital fund, except instead of investing in startups, they invested in expeditions. Here's how it worked. One chieftain might contribute the ship. Another provides provisions. Warriors invested their labor and combat skills. Merchants offered trade goods and market knowledge. Even farmers could buy in with livestock or grain. Every member received shares proportional to their investment. When the expedition returned, profits were distributed according to ownership stakes. If the voyage failed, losses were shared collectively, limiting individual risk. Sound familiar? It should. This is the exact same limited liability partnership structure that powers modern private equity, law firms, and investment syndicates today. Except the Vikings invented it 1,200 years ago.
But here's where it gets really sophisticated. The Vikings understood portfolio diversification before the term existed. No wealthy Viking put all their resources into one ship. Instead, they spread investments across multiple expeditions, sailing different routes with different objectives. Some ships targeted monasteries for quick, high-value raids. Others focused on trade missions to Constantinople. Some established seasonal trading posts. Others explored new territories for colonization. If one ship sank or got destroyed, you didn't lose everything. Your other investments kept generating returns. This is the same principle modern investors use when they diversify across stocks, bonds, and real estate. The Vikings weren't gambling. They were managing risk like professionals. The silver standard. Now let's talk about money itself. Because while Europe was stuck in a primitive barter economy, the Vikings built something extraordinary: a weight-based silver economy that was more flexible than anything that existed at the time. Vikings didn't trust coins. Coins had faces of kings and emperors, and kings could debase their currency anytime they wanted. Sound familiar? Instead, Vikings used hack silver, fragments of silver jewelry, ingots, and coins valued purely by weight. Every Viking trader carried a portable scale. When you made a transaction, you didn't count coins. You weighed silver. This eliminated currency manipulation and created a universal standard that worked from Baghdad to Britain: the portable bank account. Here's the brilliant part. Viking jewelry wasn't just decoration. It was a portable savings account. Those elaborate arm rings, neck torques, and brooches you see in museums? That was their wealth, worn on their bodies, instantly liquid, and impossible for a king to seize through taxation. When they needed to make a purchase, they simply hacked off a piece, weighed it, and paid. This is the same principle behind gold and Bitcoin today. Sound money that no government can inflate. The Vikings understood monetary theory better than most modern economics professors. The trading network Viking economic power wasn't just about taking wealth. It was about creating it through trade networks that spanned 3 continents. Viking merchants established trade routes from Scandinavia to the Middle East, connecting markets that had never been connected before.
They bought furs and amber in the frozen north, traded them for silver in the Arab world, used that silver to buy silk and spices in Constantinople, then sold those luxury goods to European nobility at massive markups. They created arbitrage opportunities across thousands of miles. They were medieval international traders, exploiting price differences between disconnected markets. And they became phenomenally wealthy doing it. But here's where Viking financial genius really shines. They understood that raiding had a shelf life. Eventually, defenses improve, targets dry up, and returns diminish. So they pivoted. The Vikings invented a strategy we now call conquest capitalism. Instead of just raiding, they started acquiring territory and extracting long-term value. Look at the Danelaw in England. Vikings conquered roughly half of England, but they didn't just pillage and leave. They established permanent settlements, implemented their legal system, and created a parallel economy that competed with Anglo-Saxon England. They turned conquered territory into productive assets, generating perpetual cash flow through taxation, trade monopolies, and agricultural output. And then there's the Danegeld, possibly the most genius protection racket in history. English kings would pay Vikings massive tribute payments to not attack. The first payment in 991 AD was 10,000 pounds of silver. By 1012, it reached 48,000 pounds. Now, historians call this extortion, but from a financial perspective, it's a classic protection scheme that generated predictable, recurring revenue with zero military risk. Why destroy a kingdom when you can tax it indefinitely? The Vikings essentially created a subscription-based revenue model. Netflix would be proud. Viking expansion wasn't random. It was a calculated expansion into high-value markets. They colonized Iceland, creating a self-governing republic and agricultural export economy. They settled Greenland, establishing trade in walrus ivory that competed with African elephant ivory in European markets. They reached North America 500 years before Columbus, attempting to establish trade with indigenous peoples. Not every expansion succeeded, but that's the point. They understood that growth requires taking calculated risks on new opportunities. Some investments fail. The ones that succeed more than compensate. So what can we learn from Viking finance in 2024? Lesson 1. Diversify your risk. The Vikings never bet everything on one ship. You shouldn't bet everything on one stock, one job, or one income stream. Spread your risk across multiple assets and opportunities. Lesson 2. Sound money matters. Vikings refused inflatable currency and chose silver instead. Today, that means understanding inflation, holding real assets, and not keeping all your wealth in depreciating dollars. Lesson 3. Build equity, not just income. Vikings evolved from taking one-time raids to owning productive territory. You need to move from trading time for money to building assets that generate wealth while you sleep. Businesses, real estate, investments. Lesson 4. Create network effects. Viking trading networks connected distant markets and created massive value. Today, your network is your net worth. Build relationships, create connections, and look for arbitrage opportunities others miss. Lesson 5. Adapt or die. When raiding stopped working, Vikings pivoted to trade and colonization. Markets change. Technologies evolve. The winners are those who adapt their strategies to new realities. The Viking Age ended in the 11th century, but their financial principles never went away. They're embedded in every modern investment fund, every diversified portfolio, every international trade agreement. The warriors who supposedly only understood violence actually understood money better than most people today. They built wealth that lasted generations, using principles that are still making people rich right now. So the next time someone tells you to work harder, remember the Vikings. They worked smarter. They pooled resources, managed risk, controlled trade routes, and built systems that generated wealth on autopilot. That's the real Viking legacy. Not axes and raids, financial dominance. If this changed how you see wealth building, hit that like button and subscribe to Forgotten Finance for more lost money lessons that need to come back to life. Drop a comment telling me what historical financial system you want me to cover next. Until next time, build your empire.